The cabin sat at the edge of Lake Wendigo, its wood worn from years of harsh winters and quiet summers. It was far enough from the nearest town that the snowplows didn't bother, and close enough to the woods that the trees whispered in the dark. Alex needed this. After a bitter divorce and the collapse of a decade-long career in publishing, his mind felt like a broken tape recorder, skipping, replaying arguments and regrets. Christina, ever the optimist, had suggested a winter getaway. "Let's unplug, just the two of us. No phones, no noise. Just us in nature," she'd said with a reassuring smile. They found the place on an obscure rental site. No reviews. One photo. A short, vague description. It seemed perfect, private, isolated, and untouched. A reset. They arrived late in the afternoon, just as the last threads of sunlight bled into the frozen lake. The air bit with a ferocity unique to upstate New York in January. Snow blanketed everything: trees, rooftop, the dock leading out onto the ice-covered lake. The silence was absolute. As Alex unlocked the creaking front door, he noticed a small package on the porch swing, wrapped in brown paper. A note was taped to the top. "Enjoy your stay. Stay warm." Inside was a box of wooden matches and a small, red candle. Christina laughed. "Kind of creepy. But sweet?" Alex forced a smile. He was too tired to wonder who had left it. The first 2 days passed in a warm haze. They built fires, drank hot chocolate laced with whiskey, and hiked into the woods. At night, they bundled under thick blankets, the only sounds being the occasional gusts of wind and the crackling of logs in the fireplace. But on the third night, the silence cracked. It was nearly midnight when Alex awoke to a distant humming, low and mechanical. He slipped out of bed, careful not to wake Christina, and pulled on a coat. Through the frosted window, he saw headlights gliding across the lake. Someone was out there on a snowmobile. He stepped outside. The wind slapped his face with ice, and he squinted into the dark. The machine came to a stop in the middle of the frozen lake, its engine idling. Then, a figure dismounted, a woman, bundled in a thick coat, waving frantically. "Help!" Her voice was faint, torn apart by the wind. "Please! My son! He's lost!" Without thinking, Alex grabbed a flashlight and headed onto the frozen lake. The surface creaked beneath his boots, but held. As he neared the woman, something about her movement struck him, too calm, too measured. When he was 10 feet away, she stopped shouting. Her face was mostly hidden behind a scarf and fur-lined hood. "Where is he?" Alex asked, scanning the darkness beyond. Her gloved hand slid from her coat, revealing a small handgun. "Give me your phone and your wallet." For a second, Alex didn't move. He thought it was a sick joke. "I'm not kidding," she hissed. "Do it." He obeyed. She took them quickly and stepped back toward the snowmobile. Before she mounted it, she tilted her head. "Nice cabin. Warm, right? Candlelight's a nice touch." Alex froze. "The matchbox. The gift. You left that?" She smiled, then sped away, the engine fading into the black. Alex stood in the middle of the lake for what felt like hours before trudging back. The front door was ajar. Christina was already awake, her eyes wide with panic. "We need to call someone," she said. "We can't," Alex replied, holding up empty hands. She took everything. In the morning, the police came, slow and skeptical. The snow had erased every trace. No tracks, no footprints, no sign of a snowmobile. Alex told them about the gift on the porch, but they dismissed it. "Probably just a local prank." "Happens more than you'd think," one officer said. Christina tried to be supportive, but Alex felt her growing distant. She avoided his eyes when he brought it up, like she doubted him too. Or worse, like she believed him but didn't want to admit something truly wrong had happened. That night, Alex couldn't sleep. He sat by the fire, staring at the small red candle still sitting on the mantel. He hadn't lit it. He was sure of it. But now, it was half burned. He checked the fireplace, ashes still warm. Another fire had been lit after he went to bed. He crept upstairs. Christina was asleep, facing the wall. The hallway creaked behind him. He spun. Nothing. He didn't sleep the rest of the night. They left the next morning. Christina didn't argue. Back in the city, Alex tried to find the listing again, nothing. The cabin had vanished from the site. He called the customer service number, disconnected. The transaction on his credit card was labeled with a generic LLC. No owner's name. No trail. He even drove to the address weeks later, hoping to speak to a neighbor. The cabin was gone. Only a snow-covered lot remained, flanked by 2 long-abandoned cottages. He stood in the snow, heart pounding, as wind howled across the frozen lake. Then he noticed something. Half buried in the snow, just beside where the porch had been, was a small red candle, burned halfway down. And next to it, a box of matches. The lake house had always been a symbol of summer. For as long as Noah could remember, it stood tucked between tall redwoods and the still, glassy waters of Lake Dyer in Northern California. His grandparents had bought the place in the 70s, a modest 2-story with an overgrown dock and an attic filled with dusty boxes and forgotten toys. It was the attic Noah remembered most. As kids, he and his little sister, Mia, would crawl up there during long summer afternoons. It smelled like cedar and mothballs, and the floor creaked with every step. They played hide and seek among old trunks and boxes of yellowing photo albums. Sometimes, they would hear soft tapping in the walls and call it the house talking. Their parents laughed it off. But the laughter ended the year their grandparents passed. The attic changed then. It became a locked space, off limits, filled with heirlooms too painful to sort through. After that, they visited less often. Eventually, the family decided to rent out the property, and one tenant stayed longer than the rest, a retired Marine named Gerald Collins. He seemed respectful at first, paid rent on time, kept to himself. But a neighbor, Mrs. Langdon, called Noah's father one afternoon, voice trembling. "I saw him watching kids through binoculars. The school bus stops right by the lake road. He's out there every morning." Noah's father drove up that same night, and Gerald was gone by the time he arrived. The front door was unlocked. Nothing was stolen, but things felt off. Furniture had been moved. A single folding chair sat in the hallway facing the attic door. Noah didn't go back that year. A year passed. Then another. They talked about selling the house but never followed through. Finally, in early spring, before the summer rush, they returned to get it ready. Noah, now in college, drove up with his parents and Mia. The lake was still cold, fog curling along the shoreline like breath. The house stood unchanged on the outside, but inside, it was stale, as if it had been holding its breath. That first evening, their golden retriever, Max, darted toward the side of the house, barking wildly. They found him limping back minutes later, his paw sliced open like it had caught glass. Noah's dad shrugged it off, he probably stepped on a branch. But something in Max's eyes unsettled Noah. The dog wouldn't go near the attic stairs after that. He lay near the fireplace and whimpered at night. The next morning, Noah noticed the attic door was ajar. He didn't remember unlocking it. Neither did anyone else. Maybe it was the wind, his mom offered, though the latch was a deadbolt. Noah climbed the steps, heart pounding. The attic was dark, quiet. Dust danced in the thin beam of sunlight from the tiny window. Everything looked untouched, boxes stacked neatly, old coats hanging on nails. But then he saw it. A mattress. Laid flat in the far corner, half covered by a worn sleeping bag. Next to it, a can opener and several empty tins of beans. A camping lantern. A cracked mug. And beside it all, a small mirror, propped against a crate, facing the attic stairs. Someone had been living here. "No one's supposed to have a key but us," Noah said later, voice low. His dad looked uncomfortable. "It's probably leftover from when Collins lived here." That was over a year ago. They called the sheriff. A deputy came out, looked around, took some photos. Said they couldn't do much unless someone was caught trespassing. Could have been a drifter. Happens more than you'd think up here. Noah didn't sleep that night. Neither did Max. Around 2 a.m., Max started growling, low and deep. Noah sat up and listened. There it was, soft creaking. From the ceiling. The attic. He grabbed a flashlight and eased open the hallway door. The attic stairs groaned with each step as he climbed. He reached the top, heart in his throat, and scanned the room. Empty. But the sleeping bag was rumpled now. And something else, on the mirror, written in what looked like grease or ash. You shouldn't have come back. Noah backed down the stairs, nearly falling. He woke his dad, showed him the message. His dad stared at it for a long time. Then, without a word, he grabbed an old sheet and wiped the mirror clean. The next morning, they packed early. But before they could leave, Mia screamed from the backyard. She was pointing at the second-story window, the attic window. The mirror was back in place. And in its reflection was the attic door, open. Noah's dad tried to call the police again, but the line was dead. He checked the fuse box, intact. Phone cables outside had been cut. Get in the car, he said. They left that afternoon, faster than they'd arrived. Back home, Noah's dad refused to talk about it. He claimed they overreacted. It's just an old house. Probably some homeless guy looking for shelter. But Noah remembered how his father had stared at the attic mirror. Like he knew something. Like he'd seen it before. A week later, Noah found an old letter while going through boxes from the house. It was addressed to his grandfather, postmarked 30 years ago. The handwriting was tight and slanted. I've sealed the attic like you asked. But I'm telling you, it's not enough. He still comes down sometimes. I hear him at night. We should have burned it down when we had the chance. It wasn't signed. Noah's hands shook as he folded the letter back. He thought about the mirror. The mattress. The cut phone lines. The house hadn't been empty. It had been waiting. He never returned. Kevin hadn't expected to be back at Black Pines Lake. The place used to give him nightmares, something about the silence of it, the stillness that felt less like peace and more like something holding its breath. But when James, his childhood friend turned Ivy League frat boy, invited him for a weekend away at his family's lake house, Kevin said yes. Trust me, you need this, James had said, handing Kevin a beer the moment they got out of the car. That night, the house was alive with noise. Music thumped from wireless speakers. James's cousins drank like they were trying to erase their last semester. Kevin, quieter than the rest, sat on the deck staring across the lake. It was colder than he remembered for late summer. Mist curled just above the surface like breath on glass. That's when he saw the flashing light. 3 quick blinks. Then 3 long. Then 3 short again. He blinked. James. You see that? James squinted, beer in hand. Yeah, looks like it's coming from the old house across the lake. Kevin didn't need to ask which house. The Holloway cabin. Long abandoned, ever since the family drowned in what the papers called a boating mishap. No one bought the place after that. The locals said it was cursed. Is that Morse code? James asked, suddenly very sober. Kevin nodded slowly. SOS. They stood in silence, the flashing continuing. Should we call someone? Kevin offered. James was already grabbing his phone, then stopped. No signal. Kevin checked his too. Dead zone. They looked at each other. Drunk. Curious. And stupid. Kayaks? James grinned. Of course kayaks, Kevin muttered. They paddled across under a moonless sky, their laughter muffled by the slap of water against plastic hulls. The light kept blinking steadily, pulsing like a heartbeat from the second-story window. As they reached the shore, Kevin's nerves tightened. The Holloway house was worse up close, its paint flaked off, windows boarded except for the one emitting the signal. The door hung slightly ajar. They stepped inside. The air was thick with mildew and something else, something sour. "Dude, are we sure this is Morse?" James asked, stepping over a broken chair. Kevin didn't answer. He was already heading upstairs, drawn toward the blinking light. At the top, they found it. A projector. Old, reel-to-reel. Wired to a lantern with a cutout spinning disc. The light blinked through it like an artificial signal. "This is fake," Kevin said. "Someone set this up," James whispered. Then they heard it. A creak from the floorboards downstairs. Then another. Heavy. Measured. They froze. "Someone's here," Kevin mouthed. They ducked behind the half-collapsed wall in the bedroom. Footsteps thudded on the stairs. Then a voice, low and guttural, echoed through the house. "You boys shouldn't have come." Kevin's heart slammed against his ribs. James grabbed his arm, motioning toward the window. Without thinking, they leapt through it, shattering the rotten wood frame. They landed hard on the muddy ground, scrambled to their kayaks, and pushed off. Behind them, the figure stepped onto the porch. Tall. Broad. Face obscured by a black balaclava. In his hand, an axe. The man didn't follow. They paddled like demons chased them. Kevin glanced back once. The man stood still, staring, the blinking light casting an eerie halo behind him. Back at the house, they locked the doors, pulled curtains, and waited for morning. When the police came, they found no sign of the man. The projector was gone. The window Kevin and James had jumped through? Intact. Untouched. The officer glanced at them skeptically. "You boys drinking last night?" Kevin started to argue, but James just said, "Yes, sir." "A bit." They both got a long lecture from their families. James's dad threatened to cut him off. Kevin's mom cried. No one believed them. But Kevin knew what he saw. 2 weeks later, a hiker found something in the woods behind the Holloway place. A pile of bones. Human. Scattered around the remnants of a rusted projector and a lantern. Forensics said the bones were over a decade old. But the lantern? It was brand new.